Well, good evening. Sun's going down. I don't know how much light I have, and mosquitoes can be bad here, so I'm not going to take too much time. When I was at PorcFest this year, I had the pleasure to meet Angela Keaton. We spoke for a bit, and she said that I should make more anti-war videos, and she was correct. And I think rather than make comprehensive videos, I would do a question to liberals, and also directed at Sam Seaton, if I'm saying that correctly. He's the host of the Majority Report radio/YouTube channel. On my last video, someone had asked if I should debate Sam Seaton. Really don't think that there's any good format for that here. The lighting's pretty good right here. So I will attach this as a video response to him. I don't want to really debate him. All the things we disagree on would be too voluminous to really have a cohesive debate about. But I do want to address the war issue and the support for Obama issue. Now, most liberals in the United States, I think, do not support war. There's a few who may be arch feminists who think that cluster bombing, carpet bombing, Afghanistan is laudable on feminist grounds, but I don't think there's very many. There may be a few homosexuals out there who think that abolishing Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and being more egalitarian in terms of homosexuals somehow excuses the wars in some way, but that's a pretty vapid argument, and I don't think there are many, if any, who really make it. I certainly don't think Sam Seaton makes it. In watching some of his videos, he had a libertarian call, and the libertarian said, look, Obama's pro-war, so you should not be for him, you should vote Gary Johnson, is what he said basically. And to his credit, Sam didn't deny it. He didn't say that Obama was really a dove. He admitted that he was hawkish and that he was disappointed about that, and went on to say that, well, for pragmatic reasons, he's still going to vote. Not just vote, but support Obama in the general election. And you can see this. I mean, he's more or less a cheerleader. I mean, maybe he'd disagree, but if you're going to defend him, you're supporting him. And I'd like to say, and he kind of gave it's the lesser of two evils. Yes, maybe, gosh, it's dark and I'm backlit. Maybe it's true that Obama's not what he promised he would be, or not what many liberals hoped, but he's certainly better than Romney, and so it makes sense to support him. Now, I agree with defensive voting. If something horrible is going to happen, voting to defend yourself, I can understand that. But there's two problems I have with this. One is a pragmatic one, and the other is a principled one. And let me do the pragmatic one first. I would agree that based on the rhetoric, Obama is better than Romney. And I would also agree that pragmatically I think it's better that Obama be president than Romney, but not because of any of his policies, mostly because when he's in power there'll be opposition from the right, and there won't be if it was, I mean, sad to say, but there won't be opposition from the right if the chief executive has an R in front of his name, even if he institutes exactly the same policies. There we go, that's a little bit better. So the problem I have though with this is we cannot, the rhetoric of politicians, even when they're running for office and even when they're in it, is really a very poor reflection, historically speaking, of what they're actually going to do. So we could say rhetorically Obama was a dove in 2007 and 2008 when he was running. and yet he wasn't. I mean, when he's come into office, he hasn't ended Guantanamo. He hasn't done anything. He's been worse on the civil liberties in terms of warrantless wiretapping and trials and extrajudicial killing, something that Bush basically said he didn't do. I wouldn't be surprised if he had, but he wouldn't admit it. Obama will. Romney is a pathological flip-flopper, and so I don't see what basis anyone can have on saying, well, based on their rhetoric, I'm going to vote yay or nay. Their rhetoric basically doesn't give us any, or at least a very poor indication of what they're going to do. So that's problematic. The other pragmatic thing is, if they have your vote, they really are not going to be swayed by their arguments. So if you say, I wish Obama would be more of, I like his domestic agenda, but I wish he would, bring the troops home, yada, yada, yada. If you vote for him and encourage other people to vote for him, then he really doesn't give a damn about how you feel about what he's doing. Politicians tend to feel that every vote they receive is a mandate for whatever it is they choose to do, even if it contradicts their rhetoric. And we could have a poll that says everyone who voted for Obama wants him to get the troops out, but as soon as he gets elected, he can just say, they elected me to be president, and I've chosen not to do that, and that's typically what they do. Fireflies are coming out. It's kind of nice. I mean, my father is a public school teacher and has been very active in his union now forever. And, they have, I think, pretty nice contracts. And they are pretty nice contracts. And at some point, the Democratic governor of Michigan, Jennifer Granholm, basically said, well, we're going to do budget cuts and we're going to drastically reduce our benefits to you. And of course, my father and probably hundreds or thousands of other MEA, which is the branch of the National Teachers Association, National Association of Educators, sorry, sent letters to the governor and the legislature saying, don't cut our benefits. Well, what do you think Jennifer Granholm replies to those? Or what? You'll vote for the Republican? No. Labor, the unions are going to vote for the Democrat no matter what. No matter how draconian or regressive the cuts are, or you say that they are, you're still going to vote for the Democrat over the Republican. So they have no reason to listen to you. If they have your vote, if they can count on your vote, then they don't care what you have to say. It's only after they lose an election, after they lose power, that they start to court people and care about what they think. So as long as you're going to be on board explicitly with Obama, regardless of what you secretly do in the ballot box, he's not going to listen to anything you have to say about foreign policy. Nothing. He doesn't need to. He has your vote. That's all he cares about. He doesn't need your input. He doesn't give a shit about your input. He can pick and choose from the tens of millions of people offering advice, and anything he wants to do, he can find somebody out there in the majority who is saying that, and then just say, hey, my constituents are telling me this, and he can ignore any particular person or point of view that he wishes. So pragmatically, I don't really see it as benefiting you to support the lesser of two evils. Now the other question, the ethical question, is how far exactly does that go? Because if someone put a gun to my head and said, you have to choose between Hitler and Stalin, I'll be right up and say, I'll choose Hitler. Now that's going to cause a lot of people to say, well, you're a communist, or I'm sorry, you're a fascist, you're a Nazi. Well, no. Absolutely opposed to Hitler or Nazism, National Socialism. But he didn't kill as many people, either domestically or internationally, as the communists did. And so I would choose him over Stalin. So I have to ask, if someone put a gun to my head, but if I had the choice, I wouldn't support either. They don't deserve it. And, the lesser of two evils is still evil. I'm sorry to say. So, this is not a rhetorical question here. This is going to sound like hyperbole, but my question is, if you are going to take the lesser of two evil arguments, how evil does Obama have to be before it's too unconscionable for you to continue to support them, even pragmatically? I know that's a hard question, because the government does a lot of evil things. Even if you're a liberal, I can think of lots of evil things the government does. I know you all love the health care bill, even though I'd never heard a liberal argue for what Obamacare actually was, but we've got the DEA going after drug users, including many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of marijuana users, including thousands of medical marijuana users. Which I think is kind of interesting that the government that's supposed to take care of us and knows so much about healthcare, and if only they had the power to run all of it, is going around basically killing people on occasion, or at the very least greatly impairing their health by stealing their medicine and arresting them for using it. But be that as may, that's pretty evil. All the prison population, that's pretty evil. The giving guns to drug cartels after you make drugs illegal, that's pretty evil. Foreign policy is pretty evil. All the stuff about, just for now ignoring the wars, the support for dictatorships, and I can't even name all of them, but Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, Yemen, Egypt, before Mubarak, since Mubarak, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan. It's not really a dictatorship there. We don't have much to do there. Sorry, I was just listing countries at that point. Morocco, Tunisia, all that stuff's pretty bad. The enforcement of our drug war in Latin America, twisting the arms of countries like Mexico and Peru and Bolivia and all over Central and Latin America, that's pretty evil. But the most evil thing, obviously, is the wars. It's the killing the people. It's the drones in Pakistan, in Yemen, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Somalia, in Libya. It seems now, at least by proxy, if not in effect, also now in Syria. That's evil. How much of that does there have to be before it's too much? It's not hypothetical. If you think, well, he gave health insurance, which of course he didn't give health insurance. He forced Americans to pay more for health insurance to insure some Americans. Of course, that's going to raise the cost, but ignore that. He gave health insurance, if you want to pretend he's Santa Claus, to millions of Americans, so he is allowed, for pragmatic reasons, to engage in war crimes. Nuremberg, aggressive war crimes. Okay, how many war crimes before it's intolerable? Not rhetorical. And I guess there's a couple rubrics you could use. Number of countries he invades, that seems kind of arbitrary, because he could engage 10 little countries and only kill a dozen people in each, or he could engage in one country and kill 100,000 or 1,000,000. That would be worse, even though it would only be one country. This is the total number killed, the total cost. What is it? What's the rubric? How terrible does it have to be? I don't know how likely a war with Iran is. I know there are people who want to have a war with Iran, and Obama has been far less than categorically against such a proposition, I'm sorry to say. If it were to happen, would that be acceptable? A war with Syria, would that be acceptable? A war on, say, Georgia's behalf, which I don't think is very likely. Even George Bush had the wisdom not to take that bait, but who knows? So that's my question. It's not meant to be rhetorical. It's how much tyranny, in this case I'm focusing on foreign tyranny, but I could qualify it as well, how much domestic tyranny is acceptable. To me, we're way past that point. Way past that point. I might have, if I had my political senses now, back in the 90s, when I was just a kid, I might have been able to put up with what Clinton had done, even though he was a domestic murderer and a foreign murderer, but on scales that Bush and Obama have just completely obliterated. The light. But not Obama, not Bush. So, I know it's a bit of a ramble. I kind of been walking. Oh, the moon. This is my old romping ground when I was a kid. So, fireworks going off until it's almost the 4th of July. I wonder how many people think about the implications in that holiday. It's one of the few that a libertarian can kind of be in favor of somewhat. But yeah, how much is too much? You know, how much do you have to? Because there are good liberals out there. I read a lot of, you know, I reference Angela Keaton on anti-war radio. She's always got, every couple days, she's got Glenn Greenwald on there. You know, I don't agree with him on probably anything domestically, despite both being gay. But you know, at least he's good on war. But if you're gonna carry water for Obama, if you're gonna pretend he's not a butcher or a war criminal, or you're gonna say it's okay that he is as long as he gives welfare to a poor person, so-called poor person. Oh, maybe they are actually poor. I didn't mean to add that insult in there, but just, I mean, I remember Harry Brown. He's dead now, but he had a radio show and he interviewed a Bush supporter. And basically Harry Brown was making the same argument I'm making here, except against conservatives. He had a guy on there, forget his name, Republican, supporter of Bush. And this was interesting. This guy, he actually was against the war in Iraq, against the war in Afghanistan as it unfolded. I think he had favored initial engagement, but not after a few weeks. He was against the war on drugs. So really, an unusual Republican. And this was back in 2005, 2006. And yet he said, I'm going to forgive Bush all of that. Everything. The wars, the treason. I mean, he actually called it treason. He goes, I'm going to forgive them. Forgive him that. Because I think there's a chance he's going to repeal Social Security. And, you know, I'm against Social Security, and I think it's cool that he was as well. But it's absolutely sickening to think that that's a trade-off that he would be willing to make. That he can engage in the wars as long as he institutes a domestic policy that I favor. Now, as it turns out, the guy was insane to think that Bush would ever do that. He expanded government involvement in healthcare and retirement, an expansion greater than anything since LBJ until Obamacare. But to think that even if he had repealed Social Security, that would justify war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan at that point. We hadn't gotten to Pakistan yet, or Yemen, as far as we know anyway. Never mind Guantanamo Bay and torture and rendition and all that. It's an absurd argument. It was absurd from this dumbass Republican, and it's pretty absurd, not only absurd, dangerous from liberals. And I appreciate those liberals who are not so stupid to not realize that at least he is engaged in war. There's plenty who think that the war's ended as soon as he got elected or whatever. Of course, that's silly. But yeah, how much is too much? You know, there's got to be a way you can qualify or quantify that. And I realize it's kind of difficult what rubric to use, but if you don't have a way to say that's too much, then it's never too much. And he has carte blanche to do whatever he wants. And if you're going to pragmatically vote for him over the Republican, and I agree the Republicans are terrible, save Ron Paul and the 2 or 3 of his ilk, then he's not going to change. The parties are not going to change if they have your votes. They're only going to change if they start losing and losing big. And then they're going to have to start going vote hunting, and then they're going to care what you have to say. Not before. Not when they have you already. And the government doesn't have to convince you once it has you. And they have you. So I don't think it's pragmatic. I mean, if the election is going to happen and you want to throw your vote in the hat, whatever. It really is a waste of time when you think about how much it counts. But if you want to do it defensively, whatever. But if you think it's actually going to achieve results, it's silly. There's no evidence that it will. The electorate seems perfectly manipulatable. They're rationally ignorant about most topics. It's not to say the government's all wise. Obama's not wise enough to run the economy, much as he may not believe that himself. But it's just kind of sad. It's not even this war thing is not even like an issue anymore. You know, they can keep doing it and doing it and doing it, and we've got a Nobel Peace Prize winner who's killing thousands of people, mostly innocent, and even the insurgents. Come on, we shouldn't be in Iraq. People want us to leave Iraq. It's the 4th of July. What would we do? Maybe I don't agree with everything. I mean, I'm sure the insurgents have done terrible things. You got to take that on a case-by-case basis, though, before you start carpet bombing. But I don't think you can even say everyone that they're aiming for really deserves it. Never mind the American citizens that it kills without even charging with a crime explicitly. Like, that doesn't... I don't know how much welfare do you... how much welfare did he have to do to compensate for that? You know, how many people had to be forced to pay insurance premiums to make Anwar al-Awlaki's and his son their murder justified? Really? That's the calculus that the greater good's going to come up with? I mean, it's not, again, it's not a rhetorical question. You say, hey, he gave insurance, he got, you know, he forced insurance premiums onto 10 million people. If you want to, you know, be intellectually dishonest about it and say he gave insurance to millions of people, how many does he have to give to pay for one life? You know, I'd like to know, you know, and I'd like to know how you think that they're ever going to pay attention to you based on how you vote. If you're going to vote for them regardless of how they do and how they act and how they govern, why should they change their ways? They apparently like the way things are right now. So, I mean, they don't really need your money. The big candidates, they're plugged into Goldman Sachs and all them. Both parties have pretty similar donors. I mean, there's a few differences. Big Labor doesn't give as much to Republicans, and I don't know, maybe there's one or two corporations that favor Republicans over Democrats. I'm sure there are. I can't think of their names right now, but they don't need your money and they don't really need your vote. And as long as you keep voting for them, that's the way it's going to be. So, I mean, I think the Republicans lost in 2006 because a lot of Republicans, to their credit, were like, this is bullshit. Why am I voting for George Bush? You know, he was supposed to be this, rhetorically, this small government conservative. And he was a fascist socialist. I mean, he's literally a Nazi. And, you know, most Republicans, you know, are so blinded by nationalism or stupidity that they don't see it. But there's a marginal group, there's probably numbers in the low millions who did, or at least the hundreds of thousands. And they said, what the hell, I'm not going to vote for him. I'm not going to vote for some rhino, as they would say. So the Republicans lost. Well, now they listen a little bit more. It's not perfect. I'm not telling you that the Republican Party now is some great thing. It's got some better elements in it. Again, 2 or 3 anyway. But it wasn't because people just kept voting for the same thing. It's because they stopped voting. And the other issue here, quite aside from voting, is you can affect change without voting. It's kind of a very unempowered, defeatist mentality to think the only way you're going to get things to change is if you can vote. That's what government wants you to think. It's much better to go around convincing people, which you've got a radio show, so you're trying to do that. So I'm not going to say that you don't do that, but I'm saying I think you should emphasize it more in your rhetoric and in your ideology. There's a lag with politicians. You know, the people change their minds, and 4 or 5 election cycles or 10 years or whatever later, politicians start to catch up, hopefully. It depends on the issue too. Some things they don't fold on, but it's not them who lead us. It's if you can go and convince Democrats that war is bad and it's destroying the world and this country and costing us God knows how much. I just saw John Bolton saying, well, defense spending's down if you don't count the war in Afghanistan. Well, why the hell should we not count the war in Afghanistan? it's like car sales are up if we just double the numbers. Yeah, that's government math for you. Social Security is fully funded if you count bonds as savings. So, God, this ended up being a rambling video. I'm sorry. I was just going for a walk, I guess, while I made one. So, yeah, please, anyone who does respond, I want an actual answer, not a, oh, Bush is bad. Yeah, I know. And Romney's bad too, but you know, Romney's such a flip-flopper. Who knows what the hell he's going to do when he gets into office? No, there's no way to know. They're such liars. You can't say that because Obama said this in this speech and that speech that he's going to do something. I can't even tell you how many times I've seen him explicitly 180 degrees what he said. I can't do that. A year later, I'm doing this. I would never do that. A year later. And it's not like I'm... Please don't think I'm just saying, oh, Obama. There's only a couple who aren't like that. And they're not all Ron Pauls. Ron Paul is like that. Rand Paul is like that. Justin Amash is like that. And, you know, I don't like him, but I won't disparage this. Kucinich is like that. Maybe Gravel. Maybe Bernie Sanders. There's maybe some other ones. But not most of them. Not the Clintons and the Obamas of the world. Certainly not the Romneys. So, I don't know how you can say, well, I'm voting for this one because of what he says. Come on. How old are you? It's just absurdly naive at this point. So, anyway, the sun is going down. And I think that's going to be it. 35 minutes later. So, good night, everyone.